Wade Hetrick. I go by Prada. It's my made-up pilot name, but I'm a major type in the Air Force Reserves right now. Also, Delta FO, formerly on the 7-3, but I've been on mil leave for quite a while, so I'll have to recall when I go back.
Prada, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Pilot podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, anytime. And I'm guessing call sign Prada came from you just having an enormous amount of Prada and probably showing up in a Prada flight suit on your first day.
Yeah, we could go with that story. That's a whole nother couple drinks involved for that full story. Most guys that have a call sign, there's a PG version and a not so PG version. So
yeah, there's been a couple
we'll just
people
put that to the PG version.
that have said I can't tell you online, but I can tell you if we ever have drinks. I'm like, dang it.
Yeah, dude. It's just that most of the call signs, like, we want everybody to sound like somewhat reasonably cool if I have to stand up in front of a room of people, but
yeah,
there's usually a very embarrassing story behind it, at least. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, hey, let's get into it, man. Why aviation? What was it about aviation that made you even want to get into this industry and this career?
Yeah, I'm a kind of a weird story, I guess. I'm from small town Pennsylvania, right near Gettysburg. So relatively small town, pretty flat, not much to do. And I was just really looking for a way to get out of my hometown. I never did a discovery flight, never did anything like that. I would guess I was just outrageously stubborn.
Yeah.
And did one commercial flight to Disney World when I was a kid, and I just decided that's what I wanted to do. After that, I had posters up in my room, and pretty humble beginnings. Dad's a plumber, mom's a school teacher, so we couldn't really afford flight lessons or anything like that. I just knew, especially after 9/11, I was a junior, if memory serves, when 9/11 happened. So I was kind of already leaning towards the military route anyway. Mm-hmm. And then that just kind of sealed the deal. Applied to get into ROTC out of Penn State and got my pilot slot out of that.
Go Buckeyes.
I can't complain. It was a good ride. Almost too good. Too good. I had my first semester or so, or some adjustment.
I mean, of all schools to do ROTC at, might as well go to Penn State and go to Happy Valley and live somewhat of a normal college life, right?
For sure. I wouldn't change any of it. I walked with some student debt. I got a partial scholarship, but no hate on my friends that chose to go to the Air Force Academy. It's just not the route I wanted to go. So all's well that ends well, right?
Well, the beautiful thing is there's many routes for everyone. So if you want to go one different route, you can do that. And guess what? You're going to be in the same position or pretty similar position as a guy that went to the academy. So
100%.
Yeah. But you mentioned there's one commercial flight. You're going to Disney World and you're like, all right, I'm going to be a pilot. What was it about the commercial flight? Was it just seeing airplanes, being in the airport, or did you kind of have a better experience? You got to go up to the cockpit. I know this could have been pre 9/11, so maybe that was a thing. But talk a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I'll talk. I mean, I'm pulling at the cobwebs here. I want to say I was like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
But I remember I was on the window seat. Mom and dad were nice enough to give me the window seat. And I remember I got to talk to the pilots very briefly when I got on board. And then it was definitely pre 9/11, so not as restrictive as we are now. But we were right behind the wing. So when I saw the flaps and slats move in and I could hear the engine spool up and I could feel like the vibration in my chest a little bit as a kid, I was just glued to the flight controls. And then we took off, as you could just see the earth, zipping by and then taking off. I was hooked after that.
And you just, mom, dad, I'm going to be a pilot. Guess what? You got to figure out a way to pay for it. Or they're like, oh, that's cool. You like it. But
they were like, cool story. You better find a scholarship.
Yeah.
Enter the Air Force.
Yeah. Was your family hesitant at all about you going in the military? Or was it kind of not necessarily a family trait, but something that was kind of welcomed?
I think it was welcome for sure. Mm-hmm. Obviously, mom's worry, right? But man, I was lucky to escape my childhood with all 10 digits in eyesight. So my mom was no stranger to me getting into questionably dangerous situations. Yeah, many stories we could talk about offline with those, but we grew up farmland all around, woods and stuff. So there was a pack of, I think there was six to 10 of us that just roamed the neighborhood in the woods and got in all kinds of trouble. I mean, we were always getting into something. So she wasn't surprised that I wanted to get into the military at all.
Yeah.
I was the first one, or still am the first one in my immediate family
Hmm.
to go in the military. I would say out to like second and third cousins. So I have a cousin that's in the Air Force, a couple years older than me, and then I had a cousin that was in the Rangers
Cool.
for a while as well. But yeah, I was kind of the first one.
And then what was it specifically about the Air Force? Was it just like, hey, Air Force, they have planes, air in the name, I go fly? Or did you kind of do your research and be like, all right, well, the Navy flies too, Army flies, they all have their own kind of respective aviation links and tracks. What was it
Yeah,
about the Air Force specifically that drew you in?
the Air Force. When I was very young, when I first started talking about this, my grandfather on my mom's side, he was in the Marines. And odd story, he actually served with Elvis
Oh,
way
wow.
back when. But he was like, "You will not join the Marines," and I'm like, "Okay, what about the Navy?" He's like, "Nope." So after that, it was like, well, best chance to fly after that's the Air Force. So it was kind of the path of least resistance, and it was where I was like gravitating to anyway.
Mhm.
He was just, through his experience was obviously very different.
Yeah.
Going through many decades prior.
It's pretty funny how something that your grandpa, your dad, your mom, like someone that you look up to can say one thing. And maybe even at that moment, like it wasn't as crucial of a moment for the person giving you the advice, but for you as a very impressionable kid, just like took that advice to heart and was like, well, my grandpa told me I cannot go to the Navy or the Marines and I will not do that.
Yeah,
No
and
matter
I
what
mean,
he
to be
says.
honest, the do carrier landings, like tip of the hat to those guys for doing that stuff. But
Yeah.
I just did not want to be stuck on a boat for 6+ months at a time. So it all kind of made
Yeah.
my desires kind of made my decision for me.
Yep.
But
And it
Grandpa
sounds
was
like,
definitely like,
yeah.
you're doing this.
And the Air Force also gets better accommodations, right? You're always staying in nicer hotels. You're doing a little bit nicer stuff.
Yeah, I can't complain about that. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up camping pretty rough and tumble kid, so that didn't necessarily bother me, but I'm not going to complain about it either.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with staying at the Ritz Carlton when you go to a different country, right? Maybe not that nice, but
Yeah, well, that only happened once or twice, but yeah,
that's funny.
I've spent plenty of time in tents with in the middle of the desert,
Yeah.
trying to fall asleep in a pool of your own sweat. But
When you were kind of making these decisions and figuring out where you're going to school, did that play any role at all, or you always wanted to go to Penn State and you knew they had that track, or were there certain ROTC Air Force schools that you were looking at and had on your mind?
Yeah, I think just keeping, I don't know if I was naive or stubborn as a kid, probably a bit of both, but Penn State was really the only university I applied to, mostly because I couldn't afford out of state tuition.
Hmm.
And then with that, being able to be far enough away from home
Yeah.
that, it's almost 3 hours from my parents' house. So I wanted to get some of that distance. But then for the cost aspect, and I was just super lucky when I found out that they had a great ROTC program that I didn't
Yeah.
have to look too much further. So I applied to the main campus and some of the satellite campuses that had ROTC programs, and that
Nice.
was it. So yeah, the rest is history.
And then too bad for their less than stellar football team. You could have gone to a better school in Ohio and they would have had a much better football team.
Man, we may have to end this interview early, but we can all agree that Michigan's the worst.
Yeah, agreed. Not a fan. Sorry.
Not a fan. No, you're good.
Yeah.
No, I
What about
go.
talk a little bit about getting into the school, getting into the RTC program? You start going a different path and kind of the people that you're with, right? Like maybe people you enter
Hmm.
Penn State with, they have this college track and they're going to go 4-year degree and kind of live their life. And now you're going 4-year degree still, ROTC, same school, just have a little bit different things you have to do that kind of separates you guys. And maybe
Sure.
it's not as fun on a Saturday morning after you went out. You had to kind of think about things a little bit differently. Talk a little bit about that.
It really wasn't bad, and uh, at that age, having a full night out the night prior didn't hurt quite as bad the next morning as it probably would now. But so for ROTC, and I'll obviously preface all this with at the time, although I don't think it's changed much since I've loosely kept in touch. with the detachment. Usually do one. Uh, you'll do one big like academic session, so it's a 2 to 3 hour. They call it leadership laboratory. So that was on Tuesdays, and then we had PT a couple times a week, and usually like one other random event. After that, it was whatever you chose to get into. So like I got into honor guard, um, which is like more ceremonial stuff with the rifles that you see. Like the Air Force has their big honor guard
Hmm.
unit. Obviously, ours was much smaller, but you know that builds like smaller teams in the unit, and then also obviously it helps with the participation points as far as eventually competing for a pilot slot. So you go through that repetition as a freshman, as a sophomore. You have to prove that you can get good enough grades to not be forced to come into the detachment and like log study hours. Or at least that's how it was when I went. And as I kind of mentioned, like there's an adjustment period for me. So I spent a little bit longer on being required to come in and study. Uh, and I eventually got my stuff together. But after that, you go to what I call basic training light. It's 4 or 5 weeks. I don't think it's changed at this point. And then you go for the summer between your sophomore and junior year, and that's kind of your first full immersion 24/7 of the military. And then in your junior and senior year, now you're kind of trying to get racked and stacked as far as what you're going to compete for your job. So midway through your I think early in your senior year, fall semester, if I recall, was when I found out I got a pilot slot.
Yeah.
So, they have pilot slots, not so many nav slots anymore because we're slowly but surely phasing out navigators as its own career field. And then you have the air battle managers, which are also rated career fields. So the rated career fields are your aviation focused career fields, and your air battle managers are the folks that sit in the back of like your big AWACS planes, the ones with the big radome on top,
Hmm.
and they control like all the air war stuff. So,
Okay.
pretty important job also. So
Yeah,
obviously,
definitely.
ended up with a pilot slot, which is thankfully I got what I wanted, and then went to undergraduate pilot training in lovely Del Rio, Texas, by the sea.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
I have
Um,
unfortunately been to Del Rio International Airport picking up freight a couple times. That's not much of an international airport. I don't really
I
know
was
how
gonna
they get that slogan there.
I asked that question. At one point, somebody was like, "Yeah, if they have customs of any kind, like they're like, oh, it's an international airport. I'm like, is it
Yeah.
though? Is it?
I'm gonna go with no. I was the
Probably
only
not.
plane there for like 4 hours. There's nothing here.
Yeah, nothing. Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
mean, great to learn how to fly, right? Other
Yep.
than not accidentally crossing into Mexico, you kind of had your run of the place.
Yeah, for sure. You're talking about the adjustment period. There's a lot of people that listen here now. Maybe they're kind of in your shoes or getting ready to go to college. What's some advice you can give them to avoid the adjustment period? Or maybe it's important to kind of have that adjustment period and kind of grow up on your own and kind of have that, oh man, I'm not where I need to be if this is what I want to do.
Yeah, I think the adjustment period is important, because if you don't do it for yourself, then somebody directing you to do something is fine. But the second you're like, and this is one thing that I think the academy folks are done a disservice on in a way, is that they are kind of more under the thumb, especially for those first several years, and then as they get into, and obviously, like I didn't go to the academy, but this is just what I have heard and been told, that as they go into their junior and senior year, they start getting little hints of freedom. Then they're more likely to kind of try to really overextend themselves with that limited time they get. So, as for the ROTC side of things, you're allowed to, I would say, ease into it a little bit more. There's not really much expected of you your freshman year other than to show up at the 4 or 5 events that you have a week and just perform when you're there. So I think the adjustment period is really important, and I don't think there's anything wrong with taking 6 months or a year in between high school and college either, if that's how you choose to get your adjustment
Yeah.
period. You just have to know what you're giving up, right? So a perfect example is, you don't know what the world's going to look like. Aviation is across the board is a great example of this. Like the industry gets just smacked in the face every couple of years,
Yep.
um, and you just don't know. So, but by the same token, it's going to be 3 years until you get a job. So like you can't predict the future that far out, especially not as a first year college kid. So I
Yeah,
wouldn't worry
definitely.
about it. I would just know the left and right bounds. Like if the line is thou shalt have a 2.5 or better, you better make sure you at least keep a 2.5, and then understand that the longer you decide to have that balance on the fun side of things, the harder it's going to be to scrap back to get your first choice out of the program.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
it's a huge, like, I don't know what your background is for your undergrad is, um, but yeah, it's a huge learning curve for anyone. It's the first time you're on your own, truly on your own. Some different variations of parenting as far as how hands are, people are, but I think it's incredibly important to just figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure out on yourself eventually. Eventually, you're going to fail, and if you've been coddled, if you've been babied the whole time, then your natural response isn't going to be to fight. It might be to give up. That's just too hard. Things are usually just given to you,
Yep.
and you get it. You're handed it, and you go do the thing. That's not the
Yeah.
case once you grow up, and everyone grows
Not
up
at
and has
all.
that moment in different spots. For some people, it's when they're playing football at Ohio State and they realize they're not going to go any farther because the guy in front of them are amazing athletes. For other people, it's
Mm-hmm.
ROTC, and everything in between. So there's definitely those moments where you're going to have the wake up moments, and you got to put on your big boy and big girl pants and get to work. And hopefully, it's not too late, like you said, where you can't maintain a 2.5 GPA, or maybe pilot slot isn't going to be a thing for you.
Yeah, and that's what I guess that would be the cautionary tale. Like, certainly have your fun, let yourself settle into this exciting time, but don't forget what you have on the line,
Yeah.
right? So, I would say the better. I actually learned this lesson like really late in life. I think relatively, like I was in my 30s. Blocking time as far as, hey, I'm going to study during these hours and I'm going to play during these hours. And really, that's the first bit of discipline. And it's not rocket science, right? But if that's something that I would have just had the epiphany, or someone would have gave me that one liner early on, that's how I probably would have structured things. And then it's easier to go out and have a good time. And then when
Yeah.
it's time to work, it's time to work.
You mentioned how the RTC kind of, you're not like a full on military to start out with, where the academy, you're kind of fully thrown in right away. Like this is the military. What was your
Yep.
first month where you were kind of thrown into like the actual military world? Were you just like, what the heck is this? Or was it kind of everything you thought it'd be, and better or worse or what?
I mean, definitely going to that basic training light, we call it field training, between my
Hmm.
sophomore and junior year was the first all in military time that I did. Um, I guess I'm kind of weird like this way. I enjoy those types of programs. I ended up going to the weapons school for the Air Force in 2015. I love that. And people look at me like I'm a crazy person, but I my brain just functions better in those environments because they're your everyday life is a thousand little molehills of things that you have to deal with. Like everything from putting gas in your car to paying your car insurance to making sure you pick up groceries. Right? You don't do any of that when you're at basic training. Like you have one singular focus, and that's it. Like literally make it to the next meal.
Hmm.
So to me, like yes, it was very difficult, and it's probably not something I would choose to do again unless I really had to. Um, but mentally, if you just go to that place, it's really not that bad,
So it's just meal to meal. You live by meal to meal. If I can make it to dinner, I can make it to
dude. Make
breakfast.
it
If I
to
can make it to
dinner.
breakfast, I make it to lunch.
And that lesson is true, I think, in most concentrated programs like that. Like take it in little chunks. Like you have a
Yeah.
couple big events, like you'll know if you have an exam coming up, or like we had to like march our flight around and in this little container and make sure we didn't break lines and stuff like that, but you knew that was coming eventually. So as long as the expectations are set and you can
Yeah.
plan for those kind of big events, yeah, man, make it to the next meal. That's it. Just keep
What was
working.
the hardest part about being an ROTC and hoping, because right, like there's a moment where you're gonna apply for a pilot slot, but just doing as much as you can, and stacking yourself up against other people and kind of your squadron, or I don't know what you gotta call it, honestly, whoever your other ROTC people are,
Yeah.
stack it up against them, other people in the country. Talk about kind of preparing yourself for that, and if you gave yourself enough time, if you wish you would have given yourself more time.
No, I think that I was pretty fortunate in that the commander at the time, at the detachment, the cadet wing as they call it, was pretty transparent. Like he kind of told you where you were at in the rack and
Mhm.
stack. So I came back from, I actually changed my major. I initially got picked up for a technical scholarship in engineering. And, I grew up, my dad's a plumber. We built our house, my family did. So I kind of wanted to go into something hands on that I could see my projects get built. So I was like, well, I guess I'll go into engineering. And dude, Calc 2 and Physics 2 just raked me over the coals, and it just wasn't in the cards at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't have the mental fortitude to power through, and it was also very difficult because at Penn State those classes are still core classes, and you're in a massive group of like 300 people. So the ability to get dedicated help is challenging. So I
Mhm.
came back from field training, and my commander sat me down. He's like, "Look, dude, your military scores are really good. Your academic scores are trash. So I get it." He's like, "I know we've talked about your family background. Like, um, we weren't like dirt poor by any means, but walking with 100K in school loans was not something that I could stomach at the time." So he said, "I think you need to make a decision." He's like, "Yes, you're going to walk with more student loans, but if you don't dump this engineering scholarship," he's like, "Do you even like doing this stuff?" I'm like, "No, I hate it." So then I'm switch. He's like, "You don't need a technical degree to get a pilot slot." And I was like, "All right, well, I guess I'm
You're like,
walking
wait,
to
what?
the."
Yeah.
And I knew that,
That's
but it was
awesome.
more about trying to hold on to the scholarship because it was a
Yeah.
technical scholarship. I had to have an association with
Got
an
it.
associate degree, or associated with a technical degree. So I ended up switching to criminology and counterterrorism, and obviously that worked out for me much better. And I actually
Absolutely.
used it. I did a deployment where one of my sole jobs was to analyze enemy threats in
Oh, that's
Afghanistan and
cool.
Iraq and stuff, in relation to airfields. So
Cool.
it was pretty cool.
Yeah, much much better than the engineering, right?
Yeah, for me anyway. I mean, I don't mind. Dude, flying math is a thing, like out basic algebra
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But that's no problem. But the calculus is that got me.
Well, I always thought it was crazy too how it's not necessarily as important of what made your major is, kind of how you said. It's
Shit.
just pick a major, stick to it, and get the best grade you can get. It doesn't matter what you necessarily choose. It's not going to affect you and what you're going to do for a pilot slot.
Sorry, I lost you for a second there. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, you're frozen for a little bit. I don't know if you come
Ah,
back.
yeah.
I was just saying how it's kind of just shocking to me, and can't remember who I was talking to, but they're talking about how there really isn't. You don't have to do a hard major, right? Like you can choose pretty much essentially whatever major you want to do. It's just about making sure you can complete it and making sure you have the grades in that major. So if you're
Yep.
competing against other people, you're almost doing yourself a disservice if you don't absolutely love what you're doing and it's hurting your grades and hurting your scores. It's like you got to pick either what's the easiest thing or what you love and you can manage the workload for.
I would say yeah, absolutely. The one exception is if you just know that you want to be a test pilot in the military,
Hmm.
then you kind of need an engineering degree. But
Yeah.
man, that's such a niche thing. And if you
Right.
already know that before you graduate, you're in the family business. So you kind of already know what you're signing up for.
Yeah, that's a
But
good point.
for everybody else, you don't need it.
Yeah. Now talk about you are getting to the point, you got your selection, you figured out what you're going to do. I guess first of all, talk about the selection process. So you
Yeah.
apply, how'd you rank them? What were your hopes and did your dreams come true or were you kind of shattered and crushed when you figured out what you're going to go do?
Oh, at the end of UPT,
Yeah.
yeah, undergraduate pilot training. I
Well, I
got.
guess it would be
Oh, sorry.
in ROTC though too. When you don't you
Oh
have
yeah,
to? I guess it's just for a pilot slot per se though, right?
pilot slide first. Yeah,
Gotcha.
it was. there again, like I was kind of like Penn State or nothing. I kind of was the same for pilot. Like if I don't get pilot, I don't really know what I want to do. So I think I put um, OSI, which is like our kind of internal FBI, if you will, to to the Air Force. I think I put that as second because law enforcement, and I did a lot of organized crime in my undergrad and
Hmm.
counterterrorism in my undergrad, so that interested me. But man, aside from those two, I put pilot, and then I put all the rated ones because it's easier to then once you're on active duty, um, recompete for a pilot slot. So
Yeah.
you can move over. So I put all the rateds first, and then I think I put OSI, and then that was kind of it. They just kind of trailed off. I couldn't even tell you what I put after
You're
that.
like, I quit. I do not want to do that. I'll pay you back
Yeah.
whatever I owe you. I do not want to be in the Air Force anymore. Thank you. This is how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
So what was the day like where you're getting ready to go in? Is it a whole, I know the military's huge on events, right? Like they're huge on having those PowerPoints where this is the plane you're going to fly or a selection, all that kind of stuff. But for the RTC part, did you just get an email saying, hey, congratulations, you're getting a pilot slot? Or was it like
Yeah.
a big whole deal?
No, it was uneventful. I
Oh,
think it
that's
was an
good.
email. I think it was an email. And then at the next like all call where everybody was in one room, the commander like listed
Hmm.
off the names and stuff like that. So I mean it didn't bother me at all. That's just how they did it. So yeah, that one was
Yeah.
pretty uneventful. But you're right that after that, all of the pilot training ones, um, those are much bigger events, much
Yeah.
more, much more build up.
So you grad high school, you graduate college, you know you're going to go to pilot school. What's the timeline from graduating college to showing up for kind of your first flight lesson or whatever comes next after completing ROTC in college?
Yeah. So after ROTC, at the time, this kind of ebbs and flows. So they always say needs of the Air Force. And one of the things that the Air Force is very not good at is holding a constant stream of like training flow. The pipelines for the Air Force are, especially pilots, are very reactive. So at the time, they called it a casual lieutenant program, and there's still some of that. But I sat for about a year, and I was like, for lack of a better term, a secretary for a colonel, which was a lot as like a brand new lieutenant, because I also had all of his counterparts from all the other agencies, lieutenant colonels and colonels. I mean, these are dudes and gals that have been in the military for 15, 20 years already, and they're
Yeah.
telling me what to do every day. So I definitely cut my teeth early in that regard and learned a lot. But so did that for a year. I took a month into my second year as that was wrapping up. I went out to Pueblo, Colorado, which
Hmm.
that is the first phase where you essentially get your PPL contained in that program. And we were flying DA-20s in Pueblo, Colorado, which is a terrible idea. Those planes, I don't know if you've ever flown one of them, but they're all carbon fiber. They're light as a feather, and the winds and gusts and stuff like that in that area are so nasty.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, if you can
yeah,
survive that, you can survive a lot of stuff, right?
man, we had a guy in my class. He was in the flare, and no control authority, massive
Yeah.
gust pushing right off the side of the runway. There's nothing he could do,
Dang.
and he ended up dropping. He's like, he was so shook after that he just dropped.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. It's
Yeah.
especially as one of your first flying events. You're like, whoa, is this what this is like? Maybe I
Yeah.
don't want to do that.
Everyone
Prob
has those moments in training where like you scare the crap out of yourself and you either
Yeah.
continue or you're like, I'm going to take a break and not get back into this. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everyone here, you probably
Mm-hmm.
have a story about where you're like, holy smokes. I'm sure it was in Pueblo too. Flying
Yep.
a
Yep.
DS-20 and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, so I had one or two scares. Obviously, I'm not going to give this gentleman's name, but he's a very large fellow, and I am 6'2". At the time, I was probably 200 pounds, and so like that's a lot of dude in a DA-20. This guy's probably, I want to say like 5'9", 5'10", and probably like 240, 250, like big dude. And his leg was in the way of the throttle. And so I'm trying to initiate a go. And I'm like, I literally had to punch his thigh, and he just didn't care. He was like just there to get paid. I'm just, my mind is blown how you're okay with that. And that was the first time in my early career I had to go to a higher up and be like, I'd rather not fly with that person again, because
Was
I
he
felt
military?
unsafe.
Was he a fellow military guy, or was he just civilian? Right?
He's a civilian dude. So
Yeah.
that program was a mix of either former military, a few that were still active duty, but predominantly, CFIIs, some guys with some experience for sure. A lot of great dudes. That was
Yeah.
the only bad apple in the whole place, that I remember, that I
Just
flew with
didn't care.
anyway.
what
Yeah,
What did he do when
just
you
like
punched his leg?
whatever.
He
Yeah,
finally moved, and he's like, "All right, cool, sorry."
cool. Sorry, I almost killed us. uh,
So how
it was
long
a
were you
fun,
flying
fun
a
little
DA
plane
20
for.
for?
How long was in the DA-20?
Yeah, how long? How many hours? You mentioned you got your essentially a PPL. Was it a full like 44, 40-ish hours, or were you just
Yeah.
doing it? Yeah,
Well, we ended up they proficiency advanced us. I
yeah,
wasn't necessarily comfortable with it, but like uh, they had us. That was the other problem with Pueblo. Is like obviously the winter is a factor with the weather, and so we
hmm
had so many down days for snow that we were a month behind, and I think I was sitting around. I think the program was supposed to be 45 hours, and I was sitting around 20, maybe 30, maybe. And they're like, we think you would pass. Go home. You're like, okay. I
we
guess
can
that's,
do that.
yeah, apparently.
Yeah,
Apparently. You'd be surprised what the military will waive when it behooves them. Um, so not super comfortable with that. And so I went back and did like one or two more flights in a 172, which was actually great because I was stationed outside of San Antonio. So those were out of San Antonio National, and just the
hmm
radios were great to get some reps there before because Pueblo is super quiet, not a lot of traffic.
yeah.
So that's actually a blessing in disguise, I think. And then after
And what
that,
came
I
next?
think
Yeah.
yeah, I think I came back for I don't know, let's say like 2 months, and then off to UPT I go out undergraduate pilot training and Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio.
How'd you prepare yourself to spend some time in Laughlin? I know you kind of mentioned that you're from essentially the middle of nowhere, as you kind of described it. So did you feel at home there? Where you're like, hey, we can kind of do whatever we want. We just got to show up for our training, and we'll be good to go.
Yeah, it honestly was the only difference. It was my hometown is a bit bigger than Del Rio, but I mean we went to the lake or we went to the shooting range every weekend, and other than that we did the training we needed to do, and it's a great like camaraderie experience. You really, I mean,
Yeah.
what I would hope for everyone in a class of 20 to 30 is that you get along with your classmates because that'll make or break your
Mhm.
time. But we were super tight, and so like every weekend, all weekend, stuff was going on, and so that was great. It made the time pass, and you're learning as a team. So that was pretty fantastic. Um, we went
Was the
across,
training
yeah,
radically different than Pueblo time, or would you say it was kind of similar, but just a little bit more military instruction? Obviously, because you're in the full fledged military right there, you're not having the civilian, the mixed training going on there with instructors. But how would the training differ from your time in Pueblo?
I was just like faster.
Yeah.
Like we're flying T6 Texan twos, like 1100 shaft horsepower, I think is what they
hmm
had. Doing aerobatics for the first time. The military portion, I thought Pueblo did a really good job setting us up for. Like it happens in movies sometimes. People are in a big classroom, they do stand up and they stand a random person up and they ask them a question like, "You have the jet." And so
hmm
they did that to us in Pueblo, which was great because it wasn't a foreign concept when we showed up. But other than that, it was just the speed of things. And I hooked a check rider too, which is not uncommon. But my first two I struggled with, and then I was kind of a late bloomer. I kind of took
Yeah.
off after that. Um, so yeah, it really wasn't. It was just more of the same and faster.
Yeah. When you say you hooked a check ride, is that? I mean, I know like so you say you fail a check ride, doing civilian training, pretty good record of it. Obviously, there's records in the military, but when you go to apply for an airline, you put like, "Hey, I failed a check ride." Is that the same thing in the military, or do they kind of? is a little bit. Do you have to fill out those boxes the same, or is there more like one big check ride that you have to pass, and those weren't the ones that you failed?
No, I mean, I definitely put that on my Delta
Yeah,
application that I failed those check rides, and you just put like what happened, what you learned from
yeah.
it. And it was so long ago. After those first couple, like I haven't, knock on wood, haven't had any issues since.
You said you got to go to requal soon, so yeah, let's knock
I
on wood
know.
for you. Oh no.
Oh
Yeah,
no. No, after that, I think just learning how to take check rides is a
yeah.
skill set in and of itself, and that was definitely a learning
Cooperate,
curve for
graduate,
me.
right? Yeah, figure out what
Dude,
they
for
want and just
sure.
give them the information. Don't try to be a superhero.
And just knowing, Murphy's Law is always in full effect
Yeah.
on check rides. That's kind of how I got bit. Um, my first one, we were in the pattern, and something happened on the radio that was not what I was expecting, and it was right when I was supposed to bring the flaps up, and it
Mm,
happens pretty quick in the T6, not quite as fast as like a fighter, but as a new student, distracted by a non-steering radio call, two potatoes, and all of a sudden the
yeah.
instructor's like telling me to bring the flaps up so I don't ever speed them. So it's just staying in your lane in the check ride and like being able to filter out what matters to you and what doesn't, so you can stay on task. I think that was
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
Well, it's also you kind of learn from experiences, right? So you kind
Oh
of
yeah.
haven't been in that situation where you get the distraction, and then you don't kind of takes you out of the moment, and you're like, oh man, I know there's probably something I need to do, but did you hear what he said? Like, what did he say? And you forget
Right.
that it's like, well, we still have to fly the airplane. We still have to make sure we don't overspeed flaps. Like, pull those up. Come on, let's go. Make your left crosswind. Let's get out of here. Like that kind of stuff, and how to kind of just manage what's going on around you. So even though it happened to lead to a failure or whatever it may be, it's still kind of a very important learning lesson. And like you said, it's not something that you should really be down on for too long, because it's something that needs to happen for you to progress. You don't necessarily need to fail, but you need to have moments where you have kind of like the letdown where it feeds your fire a little bit to keep going and you learn.
Yeah, and that actually, I went a long time without having to exercise those kind of chaotic check ride muscles again. And then I was taking my ATP. This was before they changed it to the new standard. So I picked up a dude, my evaluator, up in northern Washington. We were flying back, entering the pattern. I was making my calls, and I don't remember what he didn't like about the first call I made entering the pattern. I called the 45 to downwind and then made the second call. And he wanted another call and started arguing with me as we're about to turn for the runway. And we like start the turn, and I'm like, the gear is not down yet. I'm like, sir, not now. And so, like, in that moment, you just remember, like, you got to fly your jet, your plane. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter if it's an evaluator sitting next to you. Um, they're human. What I don't know what's going on in his life. His family could have stuff going on. He could be hyper stressed about
Exactly.
something and inadvertently taking it out on me, or maybe I messed something up that I didn't realize I messed up, but it doesn't matter. I still have to just
Put the
refocus,
gear down.
get the get the gear down, do the basics, and like
Yeah.
shut
I
everything
don't want to be
else
that guy.
that doesn't matter out. Even
Yeah.
if somebody's literally yelling in your ear right next to you,
It's like, can we talk about it on the ground, please?
that would be, yes,
Yeah.
much better.
Either you land this plane or I land the plane. It's like, but someone
Yeah,
needs to land the airplane because
someone,
we're getting
yeah,
close.
it's going to be me because I need to pass this
Yeah.
check ride.
Yeah.
uh,
So did you end up passing that check ride, or was that a
I
failure?
did. No, I
Okay,
did.
good.
We kind of talked about it. He's like, well, I wasn't really happy with the radio calls. I'm like, okay, well, to be quite frank, like I didn't really appreciate you chewing my ear about it when we are trying to run like critical checklists.
Yeah.
He's like, well, point taken. And of course, like older guy, like he just grumbling at me. And I'm just, at that point, you're just, yep, got it.
You're right, sir. I'm so
Yep,
sorry. I
absolutely.
always make that call. Yeah.
So that's all you can do. And
Yeah.
that's a lot that happens all over the place.
Yep.
You're flying a Delta flight or whatever, and the passenger's all fired up about something, and you're just like, got it, cool.
Yeah.
But
Please don't turn me in. Yeah.
yeah,
Cooperate.
but yeah,
When
man.
you're doing so, you're going through UPT. You're going from a diamond to a Texan.
Hmm.
What was that transition like? Like, I mean, when I have 40 hours and I think of going from a 172 to a Piper Arrow, to me, that's like a holy crap, like buckle up your seatbelts. We're going to go fly a fast, high powered airplane. And then you're going to an airplane, like you said, that has what, 1100 shaft horsepower. It's like, wow, that's a big difference. How
It's
do
a
you
lot.
kind of mentally prepare yourself for that?
They do a pretty good job. You do several sims before you go up.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think you only do 5 or 6 flights, and then you're solo in the T6. So it's pretty wild. Obviously, the other instructors are watching out for you, like they're giving you
Yeah.
your breath to do what you need to do. But you just kind of have to just go with it. Like there's no
Hmm.
other option. So you just same thing as next meal, next flight. Get to the next
Yeah.
flight, internalize the debrief, and then go to the next flight, the next one, and the next one. And before you know it, you're on to the next phase where I flew Beechcraft 400. Um, and then after that, it was off to the C-17. So,
Yeah. Was that the route that you wanted to go, or when did you find out that was the route you're going to go down?
so I originally wanted to fly fighters, mostly because I
Because of
wanted
Top
to.
Gun?
What's that?
Because
No,
of Top Gun?
no, I really wanted to support the guys on the ground. I
Yeah.
wanted to do the A-10 or Strike Eagle, um,
Oh, cool.
but it just wasn't in the cards for me. I obviously hooked that check right early on, recovered pretty well in the T6 phase, but not quite well enough. And my flight commander was a C-17 guy at the time, so like my direct supervisor, and he was really trying to talk me into it. He's like, you should go C-17s. You'll be great for it. I'm like, oh, I don't know. So I'll never know. Like they don't tell you other than like in thirds. I knew it was top third, but I didn't know. We only got that was also when they were really tight on fighter slots. So again, like the Air Force doesn't do a good job of being consistent.
Hmm.
My class, we only got two, I want to say two fighter slots. The other ones were foreign exchange students that happened to be in our class, and they were always going that way. And then we got no fighters, zero. So it ended up being a blessing in disguise. Um, and then I ended up in the C-17. It's been great. I still get to support the guys and gals on the ground, airdrop, air land, getting them what they need, whether it's firepower or whether it's food. We say bridge of hope, bridge of violence.
Hmm.
Whichever one you're getting that day, the C-17 can bring that to bear. So
Yeah. Was it disappointment at all when you didn't get that slot? I know you kind of see the
yeah,
writing on the wall. Writing on the wall, you see two slots open. All you know is your top third, but that could be first, could be second, could be third. I don't know how many people are in. Could be nine. So talk about if there was disappointment and kind of how you processed it and how you're able to just accept it, because we all can't just like be sad about it. You gotta eventually still just accept it and go to your job, right? So talk a little bit
mm-hmm.
about that mental process right there.
You kind of know, right? Because you talk to your classmates, and nobody's like spelling out their entire grade sheet, but you talk, right? Like who's
Hmm.
in your class. So I was pretty prepared for that to happen, especially because um, the fighter slots had been trending downward. And so I
Hmm.
knew, as opposed to like 6 months before my class and 6 months afterwards, people were getting forced into fighters that didn't even want them. My class was in the bottom of this trough where the pipeline for fighters was just so backed up. They were like, we can't take anymore. So, all of those things considered, it was not what I wanted, but
Yeah.
it didn't really matter. It was like, well, tomorrow I start prepping for C-17s. So I think
Yep.
focusing on is if you don't get your top choice, as soon as that happens, okay, what's next? And then go to that because you can't undo that. Like it is not within your realm of control.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah, and it's all about timing. Getting into the airlines, at the military, what they want, what the airline wants when you go. It's like, I mean, I wanted to get the Airbus, but I was the bottom 10 in the class. I was number 37 out of 47. There were no more Airbus slots left. So it's just, you just kind of accept it, and then you go on your way, and you just make the best of it. And it
yeah,
is what it is. Sometimes it can be more devastating than Airbus to 737 if someone really wants to be a fighter pilot, or the airline they want to go to, or the time that they get hired at an airline. Because our career at an airline looks like it's going to be much different than someone getting hired 20 years ago. They might not have had as good as a career as what we might be able to have. So it's all about timing. It's all about luck, and
it
you
really
control. You
is.
control.
And like even to say like talk about timing. The job I'm in now, I got to go. I left active duty, got my line number at Delta, and got to come back into this active guard reserve spot for another 4 years while I keep my line number. So,
Yeah.
that is total timing. And I got picked up by Delta in January of 22. So, like, right place, right time there as far as the hiring goes. But then
Hmm.
I was able to go do all kinds of crazy stuff in the C-17. Like, I've dropped a ballistic missile out of the back of the jet. I've done
That's
airdrop and
crazy.
paratroopers and all kinds of crazy stuff, like, so I've been able to, even though my timing early on was not the best, it ended up putting me in a position where I probably was able to potentially have more impact on the community that I'm in now,
Yeah.
um, and do some really awesome stuff, in my career, and then transition. I have four multi jet time or multi engine jet time, 3,500 hours in the C-17 that translates directly into the airline application.
Hmm.
So none of the fighter pilots are hurting to get picked up by a major. Don't get me wrong, but having C-17 experience just really set me up to directly transition into the airline. So it worked out better than I could have hoped.
When you're making that transition to go to an airline, did you have a top slot? You mentioned when you're doing your ATP, you're up in Washington. There's obviously one or two big airlines up in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Were you kind of focusing on those two, or were you open to go wherever and you could kind of relocate and figure it out from there?
At the time, I was a single dude, so I just got married 2 years ago now. So
Hmm.
I knew I wanted to stay in this area because I was going to go to the reserves, and there's
Hmm.
just no better setup than C-17s out of McCord and then flying out of SeaTac. So it was definitely going to be Delta or Alaska. Delta was my first choice just based on the contract at the time. Still is. So it was kind of a no brainer. Made the
Yeah.
decision for me. They had, and Delta versus Alaska, if I do want to move at any point, like when I'm done with the military altogether, much more
A
broad in
lot
the
more
opportunities
options.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
Yeah.
funneled me into that as the obvious choice. But this,
What was the process like, kind of going from military to civilian? Obviously, you're going to go back to military and do the reserves, like we talked about. But what
sure.
was the process like, kind of entering a whole new world? It wasn't kind of you're probably very comfortable with how the military operated. Now you're moving into the civilian world, and things are operating a little bit differently. Now there's probably a decent amount of military kind of still, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, military kind of, there's a lot of military people there, so you kind of feel comfortable with how Delta might operate. There might be some military backgrounds there and you feel comfortable there, but just talk about a whole new world, a whole new way to do things.
I think it's important to take your experience and just apply that to your new environment. So,
Mhm.
you know, flying large crewed aircraft was not a foreign concept to me. So I just had to learn, I just equated to differences training. So Delta, I just came in, I did NDOC, I learned the things that were different from the military and I focused on that. And I made mental effort to uh, delineate the things that were different and just not worry about the things that were the same so I could focus on learning those differences. I think that helped a lot. Um, but like anything else, like I got lucky with my sim partner. Uh, he was really awesome when I went through 7-3 training. So it's, man, if you got good people around you, it's hard to have a bad
Yeah.
time.
What's one of your favorite stories that you have from military flying?
Favorite stories?
Yeah. Like one that your go-to story, you're at a bar, you're sitting with a bunch of other dudes and you're just like, I got a story for you guys.
Yeah, it's so many like weird tales. I think that working with the Missile Defense Agency was my favorite assignment. So that there's hundreds of people involved with this, and it basically validates the United States' ability to shoot an enemy missile out of the sky. I'm talking like
Okay.
a
Oh, cool.
ICBM, like a nuke.
Yeah.
So we in the C-17 carry, it's about a 60,000 pound missile, and there's like scientists in the back, and they have all these like roll on consoles that lock into the back of the jet, and they're setting up all the telemetry for the rocket inside of the C-17 as you're flying, and you're up at 25,000 feet and you're running the whole thing like me as the aircraft commander. um, I had to run my crew and them along with, we had ships that were watching us. We had like a chase plane with forward looking infrared. We had like, there was satellites involved. And so we sling this missile out of the back of the jet, the 60,000 pound missile at 25,000 feet. And it suspends under shoot and lights off and heads toward Kodiak, Alaska, where they subsequently blow it out of the sky. And you can check it out. Like Fox News did a bit on it with some pretty good video. Um, that's probably the raddest thing I ever got to do.
That's
But
cool.
it was a crazy amount of work and learning. That was the first time I'd really managed a team that wasn't all aviators, and so people that don't think and speak like we do. So that was a
Hmm.
challenge. And then like, just little stuff, like we were in the test flights we did. We were down in Yuma, Arizona in the summertime. And I mean, you think Del Rio is hot. I know you've been there once or twice, you said. Yuma's a different kind of hot, man. But we had to maintain the temperature of, they call it the target. We had to maintain the environmental within like a very specific range, or it was going to cook itself. It's all very
Okay.
delicate electronics in there. And it was just it was such a rewarding experience to run that team of like 50 people, some of
Yeah.
which like they've all done it before, but like some of them barely speak airplane, and so you're trying to make all that happen. So it was pretty legit.
What's
That's
one of
my
your
best
least
good story.
What's your least favorite story? What's one where you're just like, what I've learned is most people in the military, they love to talk about their Sears school experience where they just got the crap beat out of them for a couple days. When we were done with training every day, I swear it was just story after story after Sears after Sears after Sears. And I was like, oh, wow, that sounds awful.
Dude, I'm gonna throw myself under the bus again. Like, I didn't mind Sear that much. I grew up camping, so like the
Yeah.
survival part was second nature to me. I was in the Boy Scouts like all through my childhood, so that was all fine. The prison part was not so fun. They figured out pretty quick that I reacted more poorly to other people getting picked on around me than picking on me. Um, I mean, at the time, I was doing MMA like 3 times a week, and I'm like, please hit me. I don't care, dude. Just like, I promise you, I've been hit harder. But they figure that out pretty quick, and so they know how to get to you. But
Yeah. Are you allowed to fight back at all? Or is that like a big
no,
no no?
no.
Yeah.
But I knew, like it. I knew it wasn't gonna really affect me because it
Yeah.
had happened to me before, many times.
Yeah. I
um,
enjoy it. Please do it again.
it's all part of the process.
Yeah.
I think I did have like a short story, pretty gnarly training event that almost got me in a really bad spot. We were doing an airdrop, and the instructors had talked previously. It was a 3 ship formation, um, and they had planned the drop, and there was terrain that was a factor. And we're like, okay, well, this isn't going to work, but let's fly it. And we all know where we need to diverge on
Hmm.
the approach. And so they all peeled off early. I'm the last jet, and I'm like, all right, well, let's like feel it out a little bit further. So I said, okay, we're going to start the turnout now. And we're probably only 300 feet over these small rolling hills that was gradually rising terrain. And
Hmm.
at Schoolhouse, it's very mechanical. Like, you start the turnout, you speed up immediately, flaps up almost immediately. And I start the turnout. I'm like, hey, we're going to stay slow because I don't want my turn radius to get spit out further into this terrain,
Hmm.
getting faster. And the co-pilot next to me is like, Roger, flaps up. I'm like, and at about the
Oh,
time it processed what he said,
oh
I heard the
no.
click for the flaps, and now we're like sinking. You feel that whoosh
Yeah.
feeling. So I like slap his hand, throw the flaps down, and punch power. And I think we saw less than 100 feet for sure.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that
What was the debrief like for that one?
the immediate debrief was, what the hell just happened? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, my aircraft and radios, I would like you to just sit there and we'll
Sit
talk.
on your hands,
Sit on your
please.
hands, please, for at least the next 10 minutes.
We got someone else back there that come up here.
Yeah. So
Dang.
that one was pretty wild. Um,
Yeah.
some weird stuff happens in Africa, man. That's all I'll say. Like, you
All
know,
right. I'll
you go
take
into,
your word for that. I hope to never find that
you're
out.
going into fields like no fence line, no, like, one airplane's been there in the last 3 months. You do a low approach just to make
Mhm.
sure there's no goats on the runway. And then, you know, depending on what you're doing there, like people get curious, they start coming out of their local villages, and like you don't know if they have
Mhm.
weapons or not. You don't know if they're friendly or not. I mean, there's
Yeah.
wild terrorist networks all over the continent of Africa. So that's a there's plenty of stories from that
Yeah,
continent
my
also.
last job, we obviously have planes that fly all over the world. So we got the globals. They used to have Gulfstreams. Now they just mostly have globals. But they would always talk about how Africa, it's like our security team would come in. It's like, look, we'll do the best we can, but like at the end of the day, like
Yeah,
it's Africa. Like I
no
mean,
joke.
we're gonna pay a security officer to sit there and watch your plane. Is he a part of the other group? We don't know. We're gonna pay him. And then you have to either hope or do your best to figure out what happened when you're away from that airplane.
Yeah, you
It's
just
like,
hope
dang.
that they paid more than the
Yeah.
locals, whoever was getting them to
Yeah.
do bad stuff, paid them.
They had one story that they told us in Indoc where they had a global land. Some might have been a Gulfstream because it was a while ago. Land somewhere in Africa, got the passengers off, and then like I don't know who it was. Someone ran up to him, was like, "Here's your flight plan. You have enough fuel to get out of here. There's an angry mob, or there's some like kind of they're overthrowing the government. They're coming toward the airport. They're going to be here in 10 minutes. You have to take off now. ATC knows you're taking off. Go." And that's all they got. It's like they know where you're going. Just go. Just go
Yeah,
take off. And apparently
yeah.
it worked out fine because there's nothing in the news about it, but that's not very warm and comforting.
When you're completely vulnerable on the ground, right? Like
Yeah.
there's nothing really you can do except take off as quick as you can.
Hmm.
But plenty of like low weather stories. Kyrgyzstan in the wintertime, they used to get like the ground be completely frozen, and we used to get these. They had us arriving at sunrise, and the sun would hit the frozen ground. You get 0 0 fog for the
Yeah.
first like 100 200 feet. So like I was on a deployment at the time. It's my first one as aircraft commander, a captain, as it were, and it's just we're trying to make up time so we can get back before dawn. I'm flying the ILS at like 200 knots. Just I can see the sun and the fog moving across the field, and we go 0 0 like at the flare. I go around and get back into holding, and I hadn't. So we have our command and control, like the same as dispatch in the airlines. They're just not quite as good, and I
Yeah.
didn't double check their fuel well enough, and we were already at min fuel as far as our recovery back to our alternate, which was way back in Afghanistan. So another like hour and a half flight back in Afghanistan.
Hmm.
So we climbed up to like best performance, and then ended up landing below min fuel.
Oh,
Back in, yeah, it was dicey for sure. We are definitely
yeah. You're like, at some point we got to land.
they were
Like we
like,
got to
"Are
do something,
they were like, are you an emergency?" I'm like, "If you don't give me priority vectors, we're going to be an
Yeah.
emergency real quick." So lots of not lots of stories like that, but handful over my 15
Yeah.
years. So
Where would you say the worst weather is in the whole world? Like where, I fly primarily United States, Mexico. At least I did Caribbean, and there's certain places I just didn't like. You kind of know what the weather's gonna be bad, but is the weather worse in other places? Would you say United States is some of the worst weather? Kind of what's your experience flying all over the world?
consistently low ceilings. You're talking Germany, Europe area, especially in the wintertime.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, the Pacific, you can get like an unexpected massive thunderstorm cell moving through there. And then you're talking about like, how do I have enough gas to go around that? So it's just different flavors. Um, I've done more cat twos into Germany than by far than anywhere. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I honestly
Yeah.
like, I do most of my flying these days around Washington, being a more senior instructor, just keeping everybody current and doing upgrade training and stuff like that. So the best part about being on training lines is if the weather's not good enough, then you don't have to go.
You let someone else have the fun out in Germany in
Yeah,
the Pacific.
I do feel
Yeah.
very, very spoiled, but it's a long time
Been
coming,
there,
right?
done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long
That's
time coming.
absolutely. You earned it. All right. Let me pull up some rapid fire questions here real quick.
Sure.
Why my phone's not about to die. No, I don't want to pay $1 a month Evernote every time. 60% off. No, go away.
Yeah, man, while you're pulling that up, like I do think the reserves are kind of a well kept secret. As
Yeah.
far as like one, if you're looking to get in the airlines, but you're worried like I want to go to the military to fly, but I don't want to give up 10 years, which is the commitment for a pilot slot of line number rising. Like go to the reserves and this AGR thing. We need more of them, quite frankly. The positions that I'm
Yeah.
in, it's a congressional thing. So write your congressperson. we need
All
more
right.
AGRs for sure. But
Good to know. There you go. Go to the reserves.
go to the reserves.
Yeah. All right, I got the questions for you. You
Send
ready?
it. Send it.
All right, what's your favorite airplane?
C-17.
Do you have a favorite corporate jet by any
Oh,
chance? Do you
corporate
know much
jet.
about corporate jets?
I would
No, well, I'm going to
go.
ask all the tiers, so you're good.
Yeah, so on the civilian side, I'd probably go like A320 just because that's what I want to probably go back to when I go back to Delta.
Okay.
That's just what I get my eyes on right now.
What's the ugliest airplane you've ever seen in your life?
Oh, probably the Guppy. I can't remember the designator for it.
What's something you wish you knew before you became a pilot?
How to chair fly.
That's a good one. Who in the industry would you like to meet most? They could be alive or they could have died.
Oof. Chuck Yeager, probably, just out of curiosity.
All right. Yeah. See if he was really as nice as everyone said he was.
Yeah, I don't think so.
What's your favorite thing about aviation?
I think just being able to have that singular focus and kind of clear your mind of all other things is a therapeutic
Yeah.
as therapeutic as it is rewarding.
The hardest approach you've ever flown?
Hardest approach, brand new aircraft commander, Cat 2 into Germany to minimums, marginally minimums after like a 26-hour day.
Recipe for success right there, if I've ever
Yeah.
heard one.
Yeah.
I haven't eaten the real food in 20 hours either. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That was rough.
What's your favorite approach you've ever flown?
Favorite approach. Favorite approach I've ever flown, like instrument wise, probably shooting the approach into Anchorage,
Mm-hmm.
Alaska. It's really pretty.
What's your favorite airport you've ever landed at?
Favorite. Uh, Civilian or military?
Whatever you want.
I really Shank, Afghanistan. I always love going to that field. It was super challenging, like in this mountainous bowl where
Yeah.
the mountains are. It's like an 8,000 foot difference between the airfield elevation and
Oh, wow.
the airfield's at 7,500 feet, and then the mountains are well over like 12.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts.
Probably a place I'll never go.
Yeah, probably a place none of us should go at this
Yeah.
time.
What's your least favorite airport you ever have landed at? One that you would really never want to go back to?
Oh man, I just every time I go to LaGuardia, the ground holds the ground. I
Hey,
do enjoy the comic relief of the controllers for sure. That makes it
yeah.
tolerable as it can be. But the ground holds are just so painful.
Don't make fun of my base for the next couple months before I can finally get out.
Dude, it is what it is. It just that amount of traffic, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody's fault.
Let's see. What's would you rather fly IFR or VFR? If you're
VFR,
flying like your own small plane.
VFR all day.
Favorite airport food. So you let's say you're in LaGuardia, you got some time to go get some food between flights. What are you gonna go get?
I'm going for any kind of breakfast sandwich, just because it can keep and it probably tastes almost as good cold.
Would you rather fly over mountains, the beach, or cities?
Mountains.
Airbus or Boeing?
Ooh, I should say Boeing, but I'm gonna go Airbus.
Yeah, I feel like that question's gonna slowly or quickly start drifting toward Airbus. It used to always be Boeing, Boeing,
Yeah,
Boeing.
I mean the C-17 is
What's your
not even a
favorite?
Boeing product really, so I really
Yeah.
have no longer any attachment to Boeing.
What's your favorite airline livery?
Sorry, say
And
it
you
again.
can't say Delta because you work for them. What's your
Oh,
favorite airline paint job? You can't say Delta since that's your airline.
I can't say Delta. Probably Alaska.
All right. Hardest jet ride you ever flown?
Hardest check ride I ever flew. Probably the recheck of the first one I hooked in pilot training, just because I was so
Yeah.
anxious. I didn't really know what was going to happen. So
I love it. What's the biggest regret of your career?
I don't think I have any, to be honest. Probably,
That's good.
I mean, I all brought me where I am now. But I think if I had to list one, I would say um, not working on myself earlier in my career. I know I would have been a better instructor, a better crew member, if I would have spent some time to work on myself a little bit earlier on.
Love it. That's a good one. What's the biggest win of your career so far?
Of my career, I mean, I've been
Getting on
pretty,
with Delta,
I've
being an
been pretty
aircraft
lucky,
commander.
man. I got to say
Yeah.
the biggest win of all of the good luck I've made for myself, timing wise, it's been this AGR spot, because
Yeah.
just what I listed earlier, like being able to keep building towards military retirement while taking mill leave from Delta, and as gracious as they have been about that,
Hmm.
keeping the line number. I got a kid on the way in August, being able to be home
Nice.
almost,
Congratulations.
yeah, almost every night. Like, I'm choosing to take the squadron to Alaska for 2 weeks, leaving tomorrow, but that's because I volunteered to go. So this job has been, while it can be frustrating at times, has been a godsend for sure.
Last one is you have a business class ticket anywhere in the world. What airline are you choosing to go on?
I want to go Delta.
All right. That was the last rapid fire question. But the last question is there's going to be people here listening to this and they kind of have a similar path that they want to go down. What are kind of three, let's say like three things that you would want to recommend to them so they can either avoid mistakes you made or maybe make the same mistakes you made? I don't know, because obviously it's good to learn from mistakes. So,
Yeah,
what are kind of three tips you'd give someone?
I would say, have hobbies outside of flying. I think it's easy in our line of work, whether you're military or civilian side, to burn out,
Hmm.
especially right now. I know a couple friends that are just like really cranking out all of their certs so they can get to a point where they can apply to the majors. Like,
Right.
the earlier you can kind of have a little something else for yourself to clear your head, the better. Um, and then just make a plan, but know that plan's going to change. You only have the
Yeah.
plan to work on getting to the next meal, right? So,
Yeah.
kind of, if you show up and you're expecting steak and eggs and it ends up being a BLT, like, so be it. But at least you had, now you just adjust the plan. You don't have to remake it from scratch or be
Hmm.
completely reactive. You want to be as proactive as you can. Um, that goes for, if you want to go to the military, what commissioning source do you want to do? ROTC, Academy, whatever. If you want to
Hmm.
go to the airlines and you're just blitzing your way as fast as you can, know where you want to live, what airline you want to fly for, reach out to um, different forums, ask questions, network early, and people that are where you want to end up. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had this in your career. Like, there's plenty of people that are willing to offer their knowledge, because very few people are like, oh, they should suffer like I suffered, and
Right.
those are the people you don't want to
Yeah.
take advice from anyway. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
those are the kind of
You
big
must
things.
suffer.
Like
Yeah.
make sure you have a plan, pace yourself, and find people that are where you want to be,
Right.
because they're the ones that are going to help you not cut corners, but do it in the most efficient way possible.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, I love it, man. Hey, my kid just, I wasn't trying to ignore you, but my kid's starting to make noise. I was trying to turn it down before he started screaming. But I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. It was a lot of fun talking to you. I really love talking to military guys because it's not a path that I've ever gone down, and I have a lot of respect for you. And it's Memorial Day, so thank you for your service. I appreciate that.
Oh,
So,
appreciate it.
very fitting podcast for Memorial Day. But I appreciate your time, and I think there'll be a lot of good that comes out of your episode. So, I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thanks for having me, and reach out anytime.
Absolutely. Anytime. Have a good one.
You too. See you.